Welcome to the Pilates Show, where we explore Pilates tips and techniques to help deepen the skill level of the movement educator while having fun.
Hi there, I'm your host, Casey Marie Hurt, and today we're going to be talking about the proper anatomical biomechanical position of the femur in the pelvis when you're prone and when you're bringing the leg into extension. Now, a lot of times what happens when we go into, say, the long box series, pull straps, T-pull, swan, the cue is that the legs turn into external rotation when you're on your belly. Now, what this leads to is a large amount of gripping in the lateral hip. And really what happens here is that this is teaching improper osteokinematics or bone rhythms. If you want to read up more on bone rhythms, please look at Eric Franklin's work. There's lots of information on that. But this is an improper bone rhythm, external rotation for hip extension. What that does is create, again, lots of extra tension and gripping in the hips and the pelvis that really is defeating the purpose of getting the femur to travel in a really nice trajectory inside the acetabulum. If you're going to bring the leg into true hip extension, the bone rhythm is actually a relative internal rotation, not an external rotation, right? So when we're walking optimally, it's like the inner thigh line's reaching behind and the front of the hip is reaching forward. That's how we root into the first ray to get that proper trajectory to be able to move forward without all of the hips and the low back getting tight. So why teach any different on the Pilates equipment? Most people are very tight. They're sitting most of the time, and when they're sitting, their legs are probably resting in external rotation because of how tight their hips are. So we really need to demand something else in the Pilates studio so that their gait can start to restore and they can start to use their hamstrings into their glutes in the proper sequence, and also get them to work, as I say, vertically, not horizontally. So we don't want the glutes to mash in towards one another, which external rotation and hip extension does. We want to get that beautiful hamstring into the deep glutes and get a nice lift to that tissue that helps to find elongation in the front and back of the body. So whenever we get into long box here, what we want to make sure that we try to facilitate with our clients is that they're not just letting their legs hang with knees out to the side and lift. That can crunch the low back to a great degree because the bone in the socket isn't supposed to move this way. What we want to try to do is really get the kneecaps to look directly down. The outsides of the legs, especially at this glute line, drips down, and from the inner thigh line, we reach up and elongate the back of the legs. This way, we can keep lots of length at the low back to do any of the work that we're going to go into in this position. Again, if you go into external rotation and lift, because the leg does not move that way anatomically in the joint, you will take that compression in your low back. And then what lots of teachers then cue is to do this, which grips the glutes even more, even though they think they're opening up the low back. Long-term scenario, not good for the joints of your pelvis. So from here, again, it's that these gluteal lines go down and the inner thigh lines lift up. That allows me to keep length in my low back in the proper position, as well as really work the deep line of the back of the leg into the glute, into this position. So please play with this cue with your clients. Their low backs, their hips will thank you.
That's it for today. If you have a different take on today's subject, or if there's anything you'd like to see covered in an upcoming episode, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below on Facebook, Twitter, or in the forum at fusionpilatesedu.com. See you next time, and never stop learning.